Order. And welcome back to everyone. We start with questions to the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government. Laurence Turner.
Question number 1, please, Mr. Speaker.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a privilege to be appointed as the Deputy Prime Minister and Secretary of State and to answer questions from honourable members today on the important issues that I have now responsibility for at such a challenging time for our communities. Councils across the country, including those under best value intervention, are feeling the strain after a decade of financial mismanagement by the previous administration. I'm determined to work constructively with both the Council and the Commissioners to reset our relationship with Birmingham and support their recovery to ensure that local public services are fit for purpose.
Laurence Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I recognise that the Secretary of State has inherited a very difficult situation. Under the Conservatives, Birmingham lost 40p in the pound and 60% of local authorities where jobs were lost, some of the sharpest cuts in the country. Our city is now facing cuts of more than 50% to some public service budgets, but new information has come to light and it is clear that part of the basis for the original intervention under her Conservative predecessor was wrong.
Yes. Order. We can't both be stopped. Just to say it's meant to be a question, you can't make a speech. I think you need an adjournment debate to finish this one off. Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, let me welcome my honourable friend to his place, and he's right to highlight the cuts that Birmingham has faced under the Tories. And unlike previous ministers, we have no interest in using Birmingham and its people as a political football. We cannot avoid the need to make difficult decisions, but I want to work with the Council leadership as well as the Commissioners, and of course are open to any representations they want to make.
Naushabah.
Mr. Speaker, question number 2, please.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With your permission, I'll take questions 2, 5, 12 and 14 together. We are committed to supporting the businesses and communities that make our high streets flourish. We're funding new partnership models with high street accelerators, implementing high street rental auctions and introducing a strong new right to buy for community assets to empower local communities to rejuvenate our high streets and address the blight of vacant premises.
Naushabah.
High streets up and down the country are the backbone of our communities, but over the years have been facing decline. For example, Gillingham High Street, in my constituency, where only yesterday we launched our Love Gillingham campaign and initiative, faces numerous challenges. Will the Minister agree to meet with me to discuss some of these challenges, as well as the possibility of a compulsory register of properties on high streets, so that councils can easily engage with owners to find new uses for them when they fall vacant?
Minister.
I thank the honourable friend for that question. I totally agree on the important role that healthy and vibrant high streets play for communities, and initiatives such as Love Gillingham are vital in bringing local people together to create high streets that work for them. Ensuring that local authorities and the communities they serve have the tools they need to support the high street is a priority. With regards to ownership, HM Land Registry is searchable for a variety of information, but I would welcome the chance to meet with my honourable friend to discuss that and perhaps Love Gillingham as well.
Patrick Hurley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The regeneration and refurbishment of town centres like mine is being structurally disincentivised by the tax regime, which gives preferential treatment to new builds on out-of-town retail parks instead of renovating our much-loved historic high streets. Southport's town centre is beautiful, but has definitely seen better days. Just this weekend, our much-loved independent bookshop, Broadhurst's, was closed down after over 100 years of trading. Given the dire economic circumstances that we inherited from the former government, what can the Minister do to incentivise the private sector to invest in our town centres and high streets, bringing life back to them?
I'm grateful for that question. With your forbearance, Mr. Speaker, I might just say, before I answer, that on behalf of me and my ministerial colleagues, that we know that the Honourable Gentleman's community has been through a dreadful last few weeks, and our support is with them, and I know that he will come forward. There are other ways in which we can help. We went through something similar in Nottingham, and I know how dreadful it is for the community, and we're here to help. In relation to the tax regime, we're committed to a fairer business rates system, and in our manifesto pledged to level the playing field between the high street and online giants, as well as incentivising investment, tackling empty properties and supporting entrepreneurship. And listening to business and communities, we will continue to consider how we can go further to support high streets, whilst new powers such as rental auctions and a right to buy community assets empower those communities to address decline.
Laurence Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Government is rightly focused on bringing empty properties back into use as part of our commitment to regenerate high streets. But encouraging footfall by supporting local communities to hold events in our town centres is another way that we can bring life back to our high streets and also support local businesses. It's certainly the approach that I took when I was the Cabinet Member on Medway Council in charge of economic regeneration using the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. Will the Right Honourable Friend meet with me to discuss learnings from this experience and what an improved new fund could look like under this government?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for the question, that kind invite. I'd be very keen to understand more about the Medway experience. We do know that UK Shared Prosperity Fund has been something that's been used throughout the country with great effectiveness. I know there's a lot of interest in the future of it. Decisions on funding beyond March 2025 are a matter for the budget, but in the meantime I'd be very keen to talk to her about her experience and the lessons that they'd learned.
Lee Pitcher.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Doncaster East in the Isle of Axone is a constituency full of really great high streets. And I've recently visited Bawtry. It was buzzing yesterday for the car show. And I've been to Jim Crowley Butchers, Tyto Solicitors over in Kroll. But what I find is these people take huge pride in the services and the products that they offer. But just down the road, their neighbouring shops are vacant and have been so sometimes for months, if not years. What I'd like to ask my right honourable friend is how we intend to stop this buying up of shops and outlets with no obvious urgency or potential to ever open them again.
Minister.
I'm grateful for that question. I know from colleagues, we've all been through a major political event or two this year, and we've been knocking on doors as you customarily do, and that feeling of frustration across the country that people feel when there are vacants on their high streets, they think it brings down the area. We have to rebalance that. And so our approach here is, as I mentioned, around high street rental auctions, which will give councils new powers to require landlords to bring those vacant commercial properties back into use, to use them for what their purpose is, so we don't see, as my honourable friend says, lots of boarded up units and people just sat on them and not providing any social purpose.
Mel Stride. Sorry, no. Wendy Morton. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our high streets are undoubtedly changing. The Conservative-led Walsall Council is working really hard to secure positive change in the high streets such as Brown Hills. We're working to secure the regeneration of Ravenscourt. We've got a new civic square. So what additional resource will my honourable friend make available to local councils? Because, of course, regeneration of our high streets with residential and commercial is, in my view, an excellent way of helping to protect Greenbelt by also regenerating those really important town centres.
Minister.
I think the right honourable lady is exactly right. The future of the high street is not about rolling it back to how things were. It would be a place for leisure, of course, a place for retail, a place for residential, and councils of all political persuasions up and down the country are trying to find that kind of perfect alchemy. With regards to funding, we have inherited an incredibly difficult funding situation that we are working our way through, and future funding decisions will be made at the budget on the 30th of October.
Kevin Holding-Ray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not sure Mel will be all that flattered, actually. But banking facilities are very important to our high street traders, Mr. Speaker. Towns like Bedale have no banks and not even a working ATM. On the basis that banks have saved around £3 billion a year by closing branches, can I ask what the Minister is doing with his counterpart in the Treasury to make sure we have proper banking facilities in towns like Bedale?
Minister.
I'm grateful to the right honourable gentleman for that question. I know he knows of which he speaks. This again is a question that we're addressing up and down the country. We know that those banking facilities bring people into a town, into a village, and have a real positive virtuous circle there. We've made a commitment to 350 new banking hubs, and as he says, we're working with Treasury colleagues at the moment on that delivery.
Sarah Dye.
Mr Speaker, the outdated business rate system has left some market towns, such as Wincanton in my constituency, with empty premises on the high streets, damaging communities' sense of pride and preventing councils from benefiting from on the back of flourishing town centres. So will the Minister work with colleagues in the Treasury to boost small businesses and regenerate high streets by reforming damaging business rates?
Very good. Minister.
I thank the Honourable Lady for her question. That's a commitment that we made at the previous election and we intend on delivering on.
Jesse Norman.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. May I congratulate the Secretary of State on her recent appointment and also on her dancing skills. My question, if I may, concerns the Stronger Towns Fund, Mr Speaker. This has been incredibly successful in Hereford, and the question has arisen as to whether or not any of the funds that may be within that scheme but not used elsewhere could be redeployed. And could I invite the Secretary of State and her team to consider whether that might be possible and potentially put in a bid, because it would be pouring very important new life into a scheme that's already going incredibly well.
I thank the right honourable gentleman for his question there. Our plan is that we want to see greater flexibility. We want to see more integrated single settlement funding pots so local communities do have that flexibility. We are dealing with a transition of model from the previous model that we inherited, and that will take time to re-engineer from one to the other. So initial spending decisions, of course, will be a matter for the 30th of October, but in his principle, I understand exactly what he's saying and the value the communities would take from that.
Afzal Khan.
Question 3, Mr Speaker.
Secretary of State. Oh.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Islamophobia is a scourge on our society which must be rooted out. And I thank my honourable friend for his work on this. And much of last month's violent disorder was Islamophobic, and this targeting of Muslims shows that we need to go further and faster in tackling this vile hatred, and it was fuelled by fake news. We now provide a greater security and rapid support for Muslim communities, and our faith minister in the other place, Lord Khan, is actively considering further steps to crack down on anti-Muslim hatred and monitor Islamophobia and engage the community effectively.
Afzal Khan.
My honourable friend will know the fear and the distress that the civil disorder this summer caused to many of my constituents and Muslim communities across the country who were targeted by violent extremists. I'm sure the Deputy Prime Minister will join me in making clear that the vast majority of people in our country of all faiths and backgrounds wish only to live together peacefully and utterly reject those who stir up division. Can she tell me what engagement ministers have undertaken with the Muslim communities since those events, and what they are doing to give reassurance for the future?
Secretary.
I thank my right honourable friend, and he's absolutely right to underline that the vast majority of people in this country of all faiths and backgrounds only want to live together peacefully. And my department is at the heart of the government's work to restore order and unity in all of our communities following the appalling disturbances we saw. And whilst we continue to make sure criminals are brought to swift justice, this vital work to strengthen the bond between government and communities, including our Muslim communities and those from many other faiths and backgrounds, is central to this government's mission to bring the whole country together.
Lee Anderson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Could the Secretary of State please explain to me and the House what the government's definition of Islamophobia actually is?
Secretary of State.
Well, I say to the honourable member that a new definition must be given careful consideration so that it comprehensively reflects multiple perspectives and considers potential implications for different communities. And we're actively considering our approach to Islamophobia, including definitions, and we'll provide further updates on this in due course.
Alex Baker.
Number 4, Mr Speaker.
Secretary.
Mr Speaker, with permission, I will take questions 4, 7 and 11 together. Last month's appalling violence exposed deep-rooted weaknesses in our society. Division and decline, combined with rising Islamophobia and racism, each contributed to these vile scenes of hatred. I'm determined we now support the recovery of towns and cities affected and investment in community cohesion. This has started with a comprehensive support offer for Southport, and I can also confirm that I will now lead across government efforts on this, and I will update the House on our plans in due course.
Alex Baker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Whatever our beliefs, faith leaders and faith groups can play an important role in bringing us all together. Will the Deputy Prime Minister join me in commending the many faith leaders I've met across Aldershot and Farnborough who are working to promote tolerance and understanding across our community? And can she outline what her department is doing to encourage those community leaders whose work reminds us that we are far more united and have far more in common than that which divides us?
So state.
I thank my honourable friend for that question. I was proud to serve alongside my good friend Jo Cox in this House, and her words about a common humanity ring true now as ever around what supports and what unites us. I've met with many local communities, businesses and other groups affected by the acts of deplorable violence we saw across the country in recent weeks. In places like Stoke-on-Trent and Rotherham, I heard powerful stories from those who experienced appalling violence, but I also heard, Mr Speaker, of how those communities came together to defend their streets again and united against hatred and thuggery. And I know that she has been a leader in her own community, and as ministers we will support her and her constituents in the spirit that she has set out.
Lower Law.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Our community cohesion in Cornwall is being undermined by the housing crisis, with many locals priced out and many even facing homelessness. This matter requires urgent attention, and I'm therefore pleased that this government has placed building more homes at the top of our legislative agenda. Can the Deputy Prime Minister ensure that in Cornwall we are building the right kind of homes, namely social homes?
Minister.
Absolutely, and my right honourable friend is right. We're strengthening housing targets and acting to ensure that local plans are ambitious enough to support this government's commitment to 1.5 million homes in this Parliament, including social homes. Under our new proposals, assessed housing need across Cornwall would increase by around 65%, demonstrating our commitment to improving the supply of new homes his constituents desperately need.
Jacob Collier.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Following the horrific Islamophobic attacks experienced by Muslim communities around the country, Princess Street Mosque in Burton-upon-Trent opened its doors to the wider community so that everyone could learn more about Islam and see their place of worship. This was a way to challenge misinformation and promote mutual understanding. Does the Deputy Prime Minister welcome this as an example of how communities can help bring people together?
I absolutely welcome it, and I commend the actions such as that taken by Burton-upon-Trent Mosque, and I agree with my honourable friend. Building understanding amongst those from different backgrounds is vital to fostering strong communities. This government is committed to working with communities around the UK to build a culture of cohesion, trust and mutual respect, and will outline further actions in due course.
Lee Gillen. Dylan.
Could I ask the Secretary of State whether she agrees that with the commitment to build 1.5 million new homes, that actually community cohesion comes from a planning system where community infrastructure is front-loaded in developments, rather than people having to live 10 years on a new build estate without anywhere to come together to celebrate as a community?
I absolutely agree that it's important that infrastructure is built around our 1.5 million homes target, and that's why we set out the proposals in the consultation on the MPPF to ensure that infrastructure is vital, that people see the homes they desperately need, the right homes that they need, and the vital infrastructure around that.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I thank the Deputy Prime Minister for her answers? And sometimes it's easy to dwell upon the negativity, Mr Speaker, but there is positives as well. The positives are, in my constituency of Strangford, where two people decided to burn down the mosque, they were caught by the police and they hopefully will be in prison. But the community came together, Mr Speaker, and that's the issue I want to put over. Across this great United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, there are many people who want to live together. My church the Baptist church that I go to in Newton Ours, all the ladies in the back of those seats were praying for those people in that church, and that was the Ards and the Strangford that I know. Sometimes, Deputy Leader, we need to put over the good things as well.
It's always a pleasure to hear from the honourable member, and he's absolutely right that actually when I was visiting those communities and what I saw our communities coming together and seeing the way in which they worked well and the way in which everybody looked out for each other, it reminded me of why I'm in this place and why I do what I do for the great British people and what they do.
Tim Farrell.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In Westmoreland, we have a story that has underpinned cohesion for decades, and that is the story, the true story, of the Windermere children. In August 1945, almost half of the children who survived the Nazi death camps were rehabilitated on the banks of Windermere at Troutbeck Bridge. Now, I wonder if the Deputy Prime Minister would agree to meet with me, because a group of us, including the 45 Aid Society and the local school, the Lake School, want to build a lasting memorial at Troutbeck Bridge at the site where the children were housed, whilst rebuilding the school that was built on that site. I wonder if she would carry on the cross-party work we had before the election, meet with me and others from that community to help make that a reality.
So say.
I absolutely congratulate the honourable member for his work in this area, and either myself or one of my ministers would be happy to meet you.
Sir Secretary of State, Kimberley.
Can the Right Honourable Lady give me her assessment of the Khan review into social cohesion?
Well, the Khan review into social cohesion is one part, an element of what we need to do to get back to addressing the issues of community cohesion, as opposed to the divisiveness in the way in which the previous government looked at community cohesion. What I'd like to see, instead of the language and tone that we've seen from the Right Honourable members and others on her bench, is actually about the tone that the Right Honourable member previously took around how we can bring communities together, how we can work together to ensure that people can respect people's differences and celebrate what makes us British, and that's that we all have different places.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Right Honourable Lady has not read the Khan review, because if she had, that's not the answer she would have given. Anyway, the review talks about the incident at Batley Grammar School in 2021. The teacher there was failed by local police and the local council and had to go into hiding. Given the fears about the rise in Islamist sectarianism in communities like West Yorkshire, can she tell me, especially given that she hasn't read the review, what her plans are to make sure that incidents like that do not happen again?
Well, I have read the review, and maybe it was because the Minister was busy launching a leadership campaign earlier today. But the point I'm making is over the previous government's administration, there wasn't an element of community cohesion. There was constant division and stoking division. What I did as Shadow Education Secretary was trying to bring our education system together. What I'd like to see across education, across our department, across our government, is about how we can celebrate our differences, how we can bring communities together. I hope the Honourable Lady, Right Honourable Lady, if she is successful as leader of the opposition, works with us on that endeavour.
Ben Goldsborough.
6, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you. The Building Safety Act 2022 requires the safety and standard of buildings to be kept under review. Building regulations can then be updated as needed. The building regulations apply to building works, including when a building is being designed, constructed, or is subject to a major redesign, and are supported by approved documents.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Residents in both Heatherset and Loddon have fallen victim to new homes being built to poor standards, shattering the dreams of home ownership from day one. Does my honourable friend agree with me that our ambition for 1.5 million new homes must be 1.5 million decently built new homes?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for his question. This government is committed to, as he said, delivering 1.5 million quality homes over this Parliament to ensure people have access to high-quality housing. New build home buyers must feel confident that their new homes are safe. This government is committed to improving redress for home buyers when things go wrong. We are considering the Competition and Market Authority's recent recommendations in its market study on house building. We will publish our response in due course.
Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Lady will be well aware of the fires that have recently taken place in East London, and the fact that many buildings, high-rise buildings in this country, are still not being safe because developers are refusing to do what they should do. What action is she going to take to force developers to actually make buildings safe for the residents that live within them?
I thank the honourable gentleman for his question, and I know he's done a great deal of work in the last Parliament on this agenda. This week, more than 7 years since the tragedy of Grenfell, the community will receive the public inquiry's final report, and I hope the findings help provide the bereaved and survivors with the truth which they deserve. But the fire that he refers to in Gillingham must have had an incredibly traumatic impact on them as well as all affected residents. We today published the written ministerial statements setting out the outstanding Phase 1 recommendations and our actions. And we have further work that is underway to ensure that we can accelerate the work to make buildings safe. And I look forward to working with him on this agenda.
Dame Meg Hillier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I've got hundreds of constituents living in leasehold properties with problems. And I should declare for the register that I live in a leasehold property, but my developer funded the full costs of removal of cladding. But for those who haven't yet got into the queue, there is still a very long wait. One of the breaks in delivering this is the lack of skills in the construction industry and the lack of people in the construction industry to carry out this work fast. So will the Minister tell me what work she's doing to work with other departments to make sure that we develop the skills we need, so that now, 7 years after Grenfell, we've still seen some buildings not started, that we can really put the foot on the accelerator on this?
I thank my right honourable friend for her question. This is a very important area, and we are absolutely committed to increasing the skills and competence within the sector. Industry has actively responded to Dame Judith Hackett's challenge, but there remains significant work that needs to be done to upskill industry members and prepare for the new regime. The Department and the Building Safety Regulator will support industry as they identify skills and capacity gaps, provide relevant training and set up accredited competence schemes. And I look forward to working with colleagues who all have an interest in speeding up the remediation work and improving the capacity in the sector.
Lee Chong.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given the government's ambitious house building plans and the energy crisis and the climate crisis, can I ask the Minister, will she bring forward legislation in the forthcoming Planning and Infrastructure Bill to, first of all, ensure that all new houses have solar panels on the roof as standard so they can generate their own power, and secondly, to ensure that net zero building standards are brought forward ASAP so that homes are well insulated, warm and cheap to heat? Thank you.
I thank the Honourable Lady for her question. This government has set out a very ambitious plan for home building, but also on green issues, and the Future Home Building Programme will address those issues, and we look forward to working with colleagues on this issue.
Clive Betts.
Mr. Speaker, the last government consulted at very great length about bringing accessibility standards for all new homes up to M42 level. The Select Committee recommended that be done immediately, and the response we got was more consultation was needed. Could we get an assurance from the Minister this now will be dealt with as a matter of urgency so that all new homes are more accessible for people with disabilities? It's a really important issue which seems to have been forgotten about.
So, Minister.
I thank my right honourable friend for the question. Today we have, in our written ministerial statement, set out a number of proposals, and the point he makes about accessibility is extremely important, and we will do further work building on the written ministerial statement that has been published today, and I look forward to working with him on this and addressing this issue.
Steph Aquilone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. People in North Norfolk desperately want new homes for local people to be built, but they know that these homes need to be both of good quality and to support active lifestyles. But currently, local councils lack the tougher powers they need to make these demands. Can the Minister tell me what she plans to do to give planners, such as North Norfolk District Council, greater powers to demand more from developers?
Minister.
Thank you. I thank the honourable gentleman for the question. The National Planning Framework will set out further how we intend to provide the support to local authorities and work closely with local authorities to ensure that this issue is addressed. Thank you.
Dr. Ellison Gordon.
Question number 8, please, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Government are committed to finally bringing the feudal leasehold system to an end. To do so, we will implement the provisions of the Leasehold and Freehold Reform Act, enact the remaining Law Commission recommendations relating to enfranchisement and the right to manage, take steps to make common hold the default tenure for new flats, and tackle unaffordable and unregulated ground rent charges. As set out in the King's Speech, draft legislation will be published in due course.
Don't tell us and go.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Many of my constituents in Stoke-on-Trent South have contacted me in this past few weeks, including in Blythebridge, telling me how the archaic leasehold system has left them at the mercy of poor management agents. They feel tricked into purchasing homes that are not covered by right to manage in the same way as flats, with service charge more than doubling. And their developers and managing agents reneging on promises to upkeep and in some cases even build the necessary infrastructure on their developments. Can the Minister please tell me if this government has plans to hold these managing agents and developers to account, perhaps with legal requirements of provision or a licensing scheme?
I thank my honourable friend for that question. The distinct set of problems faced by residential freeholders that my honourable friend describes are well known and well understood. And as we set out in our manifesto, the government are committed to bringing the injustice of leasehold private housing estates and unfair maintenance costs to an end. We intend to consult publicly on the best way to achieve this, Mr Speaker. In the interim, we will move to implement the new protections against unfair charges that were contained in the Leasehold and Freehold Reform Act 2024.
Sir Julian Lewis.
May I thank the Minister for expressing the wish of many of us to see this awful system disposed of. And could he draw his colleagues' attention to the fact that people like me living in a leasehold block have the experience of winning a first-tier tribunal hearing against a freeholder, but still awaiting the refunding of the sums of money that were wrongly taken from us in the first place. They simply ignore everything and carry on as if nothing had happened.
I thank the honourable gentleman for that question. He draws attention to one of the many failings of the feudal leasehold system, which is precisely why, by the end of this Parliament, we intend to finally end it.
Chris Vince.
Number 9, Mr Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I thank my honourable friend for his question. As he will be aware, the government is committed to delivering the biggest increase in social and affordable house building in a generation. In the 59 days we have been in office, we have already proposed changes to the National Planning Policy Framework to support that objective and confirmed a range of new flexibilities to help councils and housing associations make a greater contribution to affordable housing supply.
Chris Vince.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In its dying days, the previous government consulted upon changes to how social housing is to be allocated. Those proposals were described by the Chief Executive of Shelter as being unnecessary, unforceable and unjust. And the Chief of the Chartered Institute of Housing, Chief Executive of the Chartered Institute of Housing, warned people would force many people into homelessness. Can my honourable friend confirm that this government is not taking these damaging proposals forward?
Minister. I thank my honourable friend for that question. He is correct. The government have today published a formal response to that consultation, setting out precisely why we will not be taking these proposals forward. It is important that we allocate social housing fairly and efficiently. The proposals put forward by the previous government are deeply flawed. As respondents to the consultation made clear, not only would they fail to improve how social housing is allocated, but they would cost taxpayers a fortune, swell the number of people in expensive temporary accommodation and increase the risk of harm to the public. The only way to meet the demand for genuinely affordable social rented homes is to build more of them, Mr Speaker, which is precisely what we intend to do.
Richard Holden.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr Speaker. Obviously, social housing is important. We want to see it in the right places right across the country, but I can't understand why this government is now proposing to reduce the number of new homes in London by 17,000 a year and all around London, including in counties like Essex, by 18,000 a year. Surely one of the most important things we need to do is increase that supply of social housing, particularly in London.
Minister. I think the honourable gentleman is referring to the changes to the National Planning Policy Framework rather than social housing specifically. But we have made those changes proposed to the standard method. They will give London a realistic but achievable new target. The previous government, let me say why, Mr Speaker, the previous government, in the way it applied the urban uplift unfairly to London, gave it an unrealistic, fantastical target that it could not meet. We will ensure we're pushing the Mayor on a realistic but achievable one.
Shadow Minister David Simmons.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr Speaker. We share the ambition for seeing a big increase in the supply of housing and social housing in particular. Given there are around 1.4 million new homes with planning consent already granted in this country, what process led the government to prioritising the removal of greenbelt protections rather than building the homes that our councils have already given consent for?
What I'd say to the honourable gentleman is that we're doing both. We're making changes both to the National Planning Policy Framework to encourage the release of the right kind of lower quality grey belt land within the green belt, and we are taking action to ensure that those sites across the country which are consented but which are stalled or are not being built out at the pace required, that we move those along with additional support from the centre.
David Simmons.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. The previous government made new measures available to local authorities to encourage borrowing against the housing revenue account to enable the creation of new council housing. What measures does the government have in mind to increase the take-up of this approach by our local authorities?
Well, we're committed to working with councils, including signatories of the recent report on securing the future of council housing, to address the many challenges they're facing, including in connection with the HRA headroom. Many of them are feeling lots of pressure on that front. As a first step, we've given councils more flexibility to increase the delivery of council homes using right-to-buy receipts, and allocated an additional £450 million to councils to secure homes for families at risk of homelessness. We'll set out plans at the next fiscal event to give councils and housing associations the rent stability they need to borrow and invest in new and existing homes.
Lib Dem spokesperson Helen Morgan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. A recent Freedom of Information request by the Liberal Democrats found that 4 out of 5 councils who responded had someone on their social housing waiting list for more than a decade, and this shocking statistic, all while the stocks of social housing have been reducing. So will the Minister consider reforming the Land Compensation Act so that local councils can buy land at current value rather than hope value and get on with delivering the social housing we so desperately need?
Minister.
Well, I thank the Honourable Lady for drawing attention to the appalling record of the previous government when it came to affordable housing, in particular social rented housing. Over the past 10 years, the number of social rented homes owned by registered providers fell by over 205,000. We have to take action to better protect our stock and build new social rented homes. But she is absolutely right. When it comes to the allocation of how they're drawn, what powers are available to councils, we do need to see further reform of CPO. We need to first enact the changes that were introduced by the previous government to the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act, but we intend to go further and we will consult on those in due course.
Alison Bennett.
Number 10, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With your permission, I'll answer this 10, 15 and 16 together. I know firsthand how hard councils work to deliver essential public services, and we want to thank councillors, council officials and council workers for the hard work that they do all year round. The government is under no illusions about the challenges facing local authorities today. It's our priority to reset the relationship between local and central government and to end the politics that have seen Westminster hoard far too much power, holding back our towns, cities and villages from realising their full potential. We will provide more stability for councils through multi-year funding settlements, ending the competitive bidding process and reforming the broken audit system. And future local authority funding decisions, of course, are a matter for the spending review and the local government finance settlement, in which we are fully engaged.
Alison Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the Minister explain how the English Devolution Bill will reduce local authority budget shortfalls, ensuring essential council services for the public are protected?
Minister.
The English Devolution Bill is a landmark piece of legislation that will finally address the imbalance of power from this place to communities up and down the country, but in itself is not the answer. We know that the financial foundation on which it rests are local authorities, and they are struggling, which is why we are committed to multi-year financial settlements and committed to fair funding.
Clive Jones.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I understand that there will be a major review of local government funding next year. Representing Wokingham, whose council is the lowest funded unitary authority per head in the country, will this review look at the actual needs and costs faced by local authorities, as opposed to the current methodology of allocating funding that is based on historical data and is disproportionately skewed by simplistic measures of deprivation?
Any fair funding formula, of course, has to address a range of challenges that local authorities face, whether that's their local tax base and how much they can realistically generate from their local communities and businesses, and also the cost of service delivery and demand within the local community. And we will ensure that when the fair funding review comes forward and the multi-year settlements are part of that, that it's done with that rigour.
Natasha Irons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr Speaker, there can be no way of fixing the foundations of this country without fixing the foundations of local government. So I am pleased to hear that this government is looking to reset the relationship with local councils. As a local councillor, I'm getting stuck in the habit. However, can the Minister please outline what specific support will be given to councils that have had to issue Section 114 notices to ensure that they can deliver on this government's aims throughout the country? Thank you.
Local councils are central to delivering on this government's missions, and they are central to changing this country for the better. But we know many of them are at the cliff edge financially, and many of them will be looking at their budgets going forward and will be fearful for that, and we will work in partnership with her. I can say the department's door is always open to local authorities who need to have conversations.
Thank you, Mr. Council funding in Birmingham is inadequate because of a set of sadistic directions based on speculative estimates of equal pay liabilities. No one believes those estimates, not even the lead commissioner. So will the Minister revisit those directions quickly and meet with Birmingham MPs to help us get them right?
Minister.
First of all, we do need to reset the relationship between Westminster, the government and local authorities. I've seen far too many examples at this dispatch box where the Secretary of State and ministers have held individual councils out to dry, and that is not a relationship of equals at all. So I actually thank the leadership of Birmingham for facing the tough decisions and taking the actions that are needed, and this government will absolutely work in partnership with them in a constructive way as equals going forward.
Blake Stevenson.
Number 13, Mr Speaker.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And beauty is always part of the proposals, and the honourable member, if he'd have read our proposals in the MPPF, would know that we haven't removed all references to beauty. We have simply changed additional references made by the Conservatives that the Royal Institute for British Architects said could lead to development being turned down.
Blake Stevens.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In mid-Bedfordshire, we have a mix of historic towns and villages, as well as newer developments like Wixham's. We take more than our fair share of development, and my constituents want to see beautiful homes with the right services, which are sympathetic to the traditional character of our communities. Does the Minister agree that people want to see beautiful homes throughout England? In which case, will she reinsert beauty as a house-building objective in the revised framework?
Well, if the honourable member had read our proposals, it's regarding the inconsistencies. The government is not proposing to remove all references to beauty from the MPPF. The changes we are making, and I reiterate, relate to additional references of beauty inserted by the previous government in December 2023, and these are subjective in their nature, difficult to define, and may lead to inconsistencies in decision-making.
So, Secretary of State Kevin Badenoch.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. On the subject of the MPPF, I'm very grateful for the letter the Right Honourable Lady sent to me on Saturday. I enjoyed reading it, especially where she attempts to explain why she's reduced Sadiq Khan's London targets, and even more when she highlights that he's consistently under-delivered. But my question is, if other local leaders miss their new housing targets, will she reduce their targets too?
I mean, I find it astonishing, Mr Speaker, when the government miss their targets every single year. And as the Housing Minister has already set out, our methodology is about realistic and expectations that people can meet. We will not shy away from the decisions that need to be made to make sure that we build the homes that people need. That's why we were elected, and that's what the honourable member needs to realise.
We're going to Topicals, Ayub Khan.
Speaker. Forgive me.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'd like to pay tribute to all those involved in supporting residents in Dagenham after the appalling fire last week, a sobering reminder of the importance of making buildings safe ahead of the Grenfell inquiry report this week. My thoughts are with the bereaved families, survivors and the community of Grenfell affected during this very difficult week. My honourable friend, the Minister for Building Safety, has already said we've published an update to the House on work to address building safety issues, which we will continue to take swift action to resolve.
Mr Speaker, Birmingham Labour-run Council is on the verge of selling off some 700 residential units at a loss to the taxpayer of about £300 million. Will the Secretary of State intervene to allow the Council to retain these properties for public ownership and for the use of some desperate 25,000 families currently on the waiting list?
Secretary of State.
Well, the honourable member will know that Birmingham City Council will not be making decisions over asset sales lightly, and I know that they're working with commissioners to ensure that their financing decisions deliver value for money and they can avoid fire sales, and I'll work constructively with the Council and commissioners as this work continues.
Secretary Jeremy.
Levy funding for internal drainage boards is an increasing concern for many councils. In my own constituency, Kings Lynn and West Norfolk Borough Council are now contributing the equivalent of 43% of their council tax income to fund IDB levies. Could the Secretary of State update members on any progress determining a more sustainable funding solution for these levies and whether the one-off grant scheme to support councils might be repeated?
Minister.
Can I thank the member for his question? At the final 2024-25 local government finance settlement, a £3 million grant was announced to assist local authorities experiencing significant pressures in their internal drainage board levy. Today, I'm publishing the allocations of funding for 15 local authorities, and I can confirm that Kings Lynn and West Norfolk will receive an allocation of £254,000 from that levy. We're also working closely with our colleagues in DEFRA to explore options going forward for future allocations too.
So, Secretary of State, can be bed or not?
Mr. Speaker, it's been reported that the Secretary of State is being lobbied to increase council tax and remove discounts like the single occupant discount. Will she take this opportunity to reassure the House that the government has no plans to increase council tax as they assured us before the election?
Secretary of State.
Yes.
John Moran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituent Tracy was recently issued at the same time with a Section 21 notice to quit and a Section 13 rent increase, which she can't afford. Fearing being made homeless, she got in touch with Newcastle City Council for a property, but waiting lists for council properties are on average 27 weeks and often much longer. So when will good tenants be protected from unfair evictions or extortionate rent increases?
I'm deeply saddened to hear the plight of Tracy and her children. Our Renters' Rights Bill will protect tenants from arbitrary eviction and empower them to challenge unreasonable within-tenancy rent rises. I can assure my honourable friend that Tracy and others facing similar insecurity will not have long to wait for its introduction.
Lib Dem spokesperson Helen Morgan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Residents in rural areas, such as my own North Shropshire constituency, are seeing drastic cuts to local services, despite their council tax having gone up this year. And that's because councils are struggling to balance budgets. So when the Fair Funding Review takes place, can the Secretary of State commit to looking at the cost to deliver services over vast rural areas, because it is in excess of the cost in an urban area?
We will absolutely ensure that the true cost of public service delivery is accounted for in different parts of the country and in different local authorities, and that will be part of it. But I might just say gently, although the Conservatives were the architects of austerity, the Liberal Democrats were definitely there sharpening the pencil.
Rachel Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government has my full support in making housing more affordable for my constituents in Luton South and South Bedfordshire and across the UK. And with more social rented housing being really important to that. So would the Minister update the House on the government's plans to protect councils' existing stock by reviewing the increased right to buy discounts introduced in 2012?
Thank my honourable friend for that question. The government has started to review the increased right to buy discounts introduced in 2012, as we promised to do in our manifesto. We will lay secondary legislation in the autumn and consult on wider reforms. We recognise the importance of right to buy as a route to home ownership for tenants, but we must, as she made clear, also protect our existing stock, as well as boosting the supply of new social rented homes.
Monica Harding.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Managing the very real need to build new homes with the protection of our valuable green spaces is always going to be a tricky balancing act. Will the government put anything in the National Planning Policy Framework that will give any protection at all to the concept of the Green Belt in areas like Easham Walton? And will the Secretary of State meet with me to discuss this?
Minister.
Well, the government's made clear in that very consultation that we do not intend to change the general purpose or extent of the Green Belt. We are committed to making changes to ensure that we are releasing the right parts of the Green Belt to meet housing need. and she is more than welcome to submit her own views as part of that consultation.
Mr. West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, among the many people who are understandably concerned about the safety of buildings given recent events are those who work or live in residential social care homes. Can the Minister tell us if today's announcement includes higher safety standards, including sprinkler systems, in such homes?
Minister.
I completely agree with my honourable friend that we should ensure the most vulnerable in society are protected. That is why this government has today announced an amendment to the statutory fire safety guidance to make provisions for sprinkler systems in all new care homes.
Gideon Amos.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With over 10,000 people on the waiting list for housing in Taunton, Wellington and Somerset as a whole, many of them in really desperate conditions, will the Secretary of State allow councils to borrow at low rates of interest to build the council houses that we need across the country and support councils like Somerset pioneering the first council houses in some parts of the county for a generation?
Minister.
Well, as I made clear in a response to a previous question, we understand very much the pressure that local authorities are under. We understand the pressure on the housing revenue accounts. We are reviewing our position and will make further announcements in due course.
Chris Webb.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Blackpool's Waterloo Road and Bond Street were once thriving local and tourist hotspots, which underpinned our local economy all year round. When the Deputy Prime Minister last visited Blackpool with me, she saw for herself the awful visible decline of these areas. Will her and her department work with me and local businesses to ensure their successful regeneration?
Secretary of State.
I thank my right honourable friend, and it was great to visit Blackpool during the general election campaign, and I've visited Blackpool on many occasions during my childhood as well. My department are working in partnership with Blackpool to unlock significant investment, and I've seen that more needs to be done to unleash Blackpool's great potential. I'll work with the honourable member on the ongoing regeneration of Blackpool to deliver better quality housing and a stronger local economy, and you never know, we might visit the nightlife as well.
Yeah. To Bedford.
Thank you, Speaker. Will the Secretary of State join me in calling on Labour-controlled Leicester City Council to review its proposals in its own local plan to site 400 houses, 7 traveller pitches and a waste processing centre on the edge of Glenfield Village in my constituency, because it's causing considerable concern to my residents?
We're not going to interfere with the discretion of local councils to make such decisions. What we are saying is part of the NPPF consultation is the importance of having a local plan in place. We've inherited, Mr. Speaker, a disastrous situation where we only have 31% of local authorities across the country with such a plan up to date and in place. We need to do more to drive universal coverage. Local plans are the best way that local communities can shape development in their areas.
Dr. Becky Cooper.
Mr. Speaker, in Worthing West, where we're 90% developed, I'm often contacted by residents who support new developments, particularly social rents and for first-time buyers, but they are concerned that we must also value our increasingly urban green spaces. What steps are being taken to balance urban green space provision with our need for housing to ensure all our communities are able to thrive and to stay healthy?
Mr. Speaker, the Government are committed to ensuring that development protects and provides...
Of the House, it's not really the done thing, and he should know better than anybody, Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Government are committed, as I was saying, to ensuring that development both protects and provides for green space. I'm more than welcome to discuss the particular challenges that my honourable friend faces in her particular part of the country.
Andrew Rosner.
Mr. Speaker, the Deputy Prime Minister should be aware that people in Romford are very angry that Mayor Khan is forcing us to build high-rise blocks. Does she agree with me that the London Borough of Havering, despite being part of Greater London, is Essex, and that we should remain a town and country borough?
Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, as a Mancunian, I don't think I'm in any place to tell Londoners what's in Essex and what's not.
Kevin Bonnever.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituency of Stevenage has been held back by 14 years of Conservative cuts to county council and borough and district councils. So I hope that the new government's devolution agenda will help rebuild and improve our local public services. Can can the Secretary of State provide an update on the consultation with the County Council in Hertfordshire and our 10 borough and district authorities?
Who wants it? Minister.
Yeah, we're well underway of reviewing the current consultations that are taking place and reviewing all the devolution agreements that weren't tabled before the election. I'm very happy to meet with a member outside of this to discuss further.
Pip Malthouse.
Mr. Speaker, would the Minister please confirm that where a rural community has made gone to the time and effort of producing a neighbourhood plan, that neighbourhood plan will be respected for its lifespan, notwithstanding new housing targets for the local planning authority?
Mr. Speaker, the Government does not intend to require local planning authorities to amend neighbourhood plans in the future. Communities will continue to be able to choose whether they review or update their neighbourhood plan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wonder if the Minister could expand on his earlier answer relating to devolution and perhaps provide a time frame for some of these discussions that are taking place with the local authorities, devolution plans that did not go ahead before the last general election, because my constituents in Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes are very keen to move ahead with improvements to transport, education and inward investment.
Minister.
Thank you. Can I thank the member for the question and also for the work that she is doing on this agenda to further devolution in her region. We do recognise that some parts of the country, including Hull and East Yorkshire and Greater Lincolnshire, local authorities did work up proposals for the previous government that weren't tabled before the election, and we're currently working through those at pace to make sure that areas have clarity about where those are up to, and we look forward to reporting as soon as possible on that and meeting with local MPs in that process.
Manera Wilson.
Mr. Speaker, when the Secretary of State is looking at the rules around compulsory purchase orders by local authorities to remove hope value for house building purposes, will she also look at that same ruling around playing fields, where local authority want to keep playing fields as playing fields and not build on them, so that sites such as Udney Park playing fields in my constituency that have laid derelict for a decade under private ownership can be brought into community use again?
It sounds like the Honourable Lady has a response to the MPPF consultation in development, but I welcome her views on that particular point on playing fields. What I'd say on CPO is there's a discretionary power to disapply Section 17 of the 1961 Land Compensation Act in relation to hope value. We need to ensure it is brought into force, and then we're going to take further steps to reform CPO as outlined in our manifesto.
Anna Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The last government made local councils compete for pots of money. Bingley Pool, in my constituency, was due to receive a Levelling Up award. These funds are vital to regeneration of our towns. Can my honourable friend update the House on the process for reviewing these awards and timescales for informing communities like mine who've been let down by the Conservatives' unfunded promises?
I thank the honourable member, and I share her anger at promises made to communities that didn't have a strong financial backing that this government is now having to work its way through. We want to move away, as I say, from that broken competitive model, but we do know that the promises have been made and we're working on them at the moment, and you will hear further answers from us before the budget on the 30th of October.
Sir Roger Gale.
Mr. Speaker, the National Planning Policy Framework militates very clearly against building on agricultural land. Notwithstanding his desire not to interfere in local democracy, would the Minister write to the leader of Thanet District Council and remind him that agricultural land is the stuff that we grow food on, and it's needed for housing if we are to remain sustainable?
I thank the Father of the House for his question. We are maintaining the existing strong protection for the best and most versatile agricultural land, the land which is most important for food production. The line which we are removing from the MPPF was added in December 2023 and does not provide clear and meaningful guidance to authorities about what they should do in addition to that strong protection.
Joe Powell.
Mr. Speaker, on Wednesday, the Phase 2 report of the Grenfell inquiry will be published, and I'm sure the whole House will join me in remembering the 72 residents who lost their lives in an entirely preventable tragedy over 7 years ago. Mr. Speaker, there are still 4 outstanding recommendations for central government from the Phase 1 report, including personalised emergency evacuation plans for disabled people. Would the Minister be able to update us on progress on implementing those Phase 1 recommendations in full?
I thank the member for his statement, and he's absolutely right. This week will be a very difficult week for the community around Grenfell, including the survivors and those that lost loved ones. And he's also absolutely right to say that phase 1 there is outstanding measures which the Minister has set out in a written ministerial statement today, which hopefully will show the intent of where this government wants to go. But there is a lot that needs to be done, and on Wednesday I think the whole House will have a moment of reflection, and in the coming weeks we'll think of those at Grenfell.
Graham Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I congratulate the Secretary of State on her dancing skills, on her current appointment, and on her outstanding answer to the earlier question from the Shadow Secretary of State on council tax. But could I pursue that and say specifically, could she give the House the assurance that the single person discount, which is so important to pensioners who are already losing out because of the absence of the winter fuel allowance, that she can guarantee today, put gladness into all their hearts across the country by saying she will not look at removing that single person discount, so important to people, elderly people in particular, who live on small incomes.
Seriously.
Mr. Speaker, thank you first of all for your comments on my dance moves. That is subjective like beauty, of course. But on a serious note, I find it astonishing that members opposite, after running down the economy in the way that they have, after the Chancellor had to come to this House to talk about the billions of pounds black hole that they're now trying to claim, that this government is about raising taxes. This government is about making sure that working people are better off, and will intend to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the light that winter fuel payments will no longer be there for older people who aren't entitled to pension credit, could she say what steps she's taken to extend the Housing Support Fund so that local authorities can provide emergency grants as well as warm spaces?
Secretary of State.
You're absolutely right that people on pension credits, and in particular the support grant, it's incredibly important that people, first of all, who are entitled to those benefits, many of which are not currently claiming them, does that, but that also the housing support grant and the work that we can do to support people is well known, and we work with local authorities who administer that fund to make sure that it's given to people where they need it the most. But we inherited a very difficult circumstance because of the previous Conservative government, and the Chancellor has set out how we can expand that fund to help people who desperately need it.
Rebecca Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Devonport Dockyard in Plymouth has a strong future, proudly refitting the Royal Navy's submarines. However, to enable this to happen, the city needs, amongst other things, more housing. The location for this housing exists already in the city centre, but it will require a national effort to deliver it. Will the Minister agree to meet with a cross-party delegation from Plymouth to take forward these vital plans?
Minister.
I'm well aware of the case she cites and the city centre location. I'm more than happy to meet with that delegation.
Sean Davies.
Speaker, I know from my time as chair of the Local Government Association that all council leaders, regardless of political persuasion, need more money for local government, but also there is a commitment from the sector to reform the sector. Will the Minister confirm that his willingness to work with council leaders, regardless of political persuasion, to reform the system, and also to take a look at population undercount, which is costing my council millions of pounds each year?
Well, can I pay tribute to my honourable friend for the work that he did in local government and at the LGA as chair of that body to make sure that the sector spoke with one voice and worked in collaboration with government to try and get a better outcome for local councils. This government will continue in that spirit.
Paul Holmes.
I'm deeply grateful, Mr. Speaker. The Minister for Local Government may be aware that Liberal Democrat-controlled Eastleigh Borough Council is subject to a best value notice due to their unsustainable £700 million worth of debt. More audits have taken place that show more borrowing is taking place. So will the Minister agree to meet with me to discuss this risk to my constituents and their taxpayers' money?
Okay.
I'm very happy to have a meeting probably next week on that issue.
Claire Hazelgrove.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as the housing crisis worsened under the last government, HMOs have become more prevalent in a number of communities, including in Filton, Stoke Park and Stoke Gifford. Naturally, more people living in more homes than local infrastructure planned for has an impact on public services and the character of a community, and routes like permitted development are regularly being used to start these extensions and conversions. Would the Minister agree to meet with me as the Government shapes much-needed changes to the planning framework and regulations to discuss how those for HMOs might be included in an appropriate way?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for her question. More than happy to meet with her to discuss those issues.
Max Wilkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Devolution is a positive thing and we welcome it. Gloucestershire has my constituency, Cheltenham, within it. And there is a fear locally that Gloucestershire, which has coterminous boundaries for a county council, a police force, a fire service, an economic development function and a health service, may be placed in a larger devolution deal with other areas to the north or perhaps to the south in an existing devolution deal. Can the Secretary of State or Ministers confirm that that might not be the case?
Minister.
Within the first couple of days, actually, the Deputy Prime Minister wrote out to local authority leaders to invite them in for discussions on devolution agreements. One of the founding principles, of course, is on geography that is sensible and makes sense, and having those coterminous boundaries with LEPs, with public services and the rest do make sense. Without going into specifics of individual conversations that are taking place, I would advise him to bring into the English devolution bill and the work that's taking place there to make sure that all of England has a voice and a role in devolution.
Peter Dowd, final question.
Speaker, can I say that the Deputy Prime Minister has shown her footwork at the dispatch box is good as a footwork on the dance floor. Mr. Speaker, at this year's elections, veterans who brought their IDs to prove their identity were turned away. Will the Minister guarantee and confirm that this will change?
Minister.
I'm grateful for that very important question. Veterans were turned away at recent elections. We've committed to changing that and we'll be introducing the necessary regulations in due course.
Right, we'll let the front benches clear.